Hey, I'm Chris with How to Politics. I'm here to talk to you today about Trump's big tax plan. On the surface, it should be easy to sell, right? They say 84% of households will get a tax cut. That's great. That's fantastic. Benefits everybody. If you dig about 2 inches deeper, it's pretty obvious what's going on. So, the main takeaway is that the Republican tax proposal skews hard to the rich and skews hard against the poor. That's really kind of the big takeaway. Let's dig a little bit into why. So, the lowest income 20%, that's people who make $35,000 a year or less. They will get a tax cut of less than 1% of their income. So, it's going to average about $160. Also, though, this bill is going to strip away benefits that those folks get from the government that help subsidize their health care under the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. If you factor in the loss of those subsidies that helps pay for health care, the average tax cut for folks in the lowest 20% is actually about $60. The loss of those subsidies hurts the poorest of the poor even more, though. If you look at people who make less than $20,000 a year, under this bill, they will actually pay more in taxes, net on average $40 more in taxes because of the loss of the healthcare subsidies. At the top end, it won't surprise you, they're doing quite well. If you look at the 95 to 99% group in the 95th to 99th percentile of income, they'll get a tax cut of about 4.3%. Remember, for the lowest income, it was less than 1%. The folks between 95 and 99% are going to get an average tax cut of $21,000. Again, compare that to the $160 that folks at the bottom end of the scale will get. But the people at the very top of the top 0.1%, people who make more than $5 million a year, who already make more than $5 million a year, they'll get a tax cut of 3.3%, which is almost $300,000. Again, compare $300,000 to $21,000 for people at the 95% level, to $160 or $60 for people at the bottom. It's worth noting that there are big differences that come from individual circumstances. For example, the bill increases the child tax credit, and so families with children will get larger tax breaks than families without children that make the same amount of money. There are limits on the ability of businesses to deduct their state and local taxes. So there's going to be big differences within each income range. And you might say, but Chris, the money goes to the job creators. In theory, the businesses and rich people that get tax cuts would invest in new equipment, facilities, their workforce. That would fuel economic growth. Here's the problem, though. Multiple independent analyses that have looked at the 2017 tax cuts, which these tax cuts are designed to extend, and they show that that reinvestment never happened. Remember that those tax cuts, the 2017 tax cuts from Trump's first term, remember that those cuts skewed towards the wealthy too. One of the key findings of economic research is that wealthy households spend much less of the marginal tax dollars that they get back. Poorer households tend to spend every extra dollar that they get when they're living from paycheck to paycheck. So independent analyses have shown that most growth after the 2017 tax cuts was caused by increases in demand, not corporate investment, not rising wages. So if rich people get massive tax cuts, mathematically that adds $3.8 trillion to the national debt. What do we get for that? In exchange, according to nonpartisan scorekeepers, what we get is a 0.03% increase in GDP in exchange for $3.8 trillion added to the national debt. So Republicans think that they can offset that. They can offset that with decreases in spending so that we won't be adding as much to the national credit card. Well, what are their proposals? Well, first, they want to cut Medicaid. Medicaid, of course, is a health insurance providing program that benefits 76 million Americans, most of them lower income. They want to cut the SNAP program. That's a program that gives food assistance so that people can have food to eat. And that benefits 41 million of the poorest Americans. They also want to make it harder to get rent assistance. Do the Republicans have any suggestions for programs for the rich to cut? Can they think of any programs for the rich to cut other than tax cuts and stuff to buy? No. They have not suggested any programs that would benefit the rich that they could get rid of to pay for the trillions of dollars that they're going to give to wealthy folks in this tax cut. So how should we understand the tax cuts? Pretty straightforward. It's a vehicle to shovel money into the pockets of the wealthiest Americans and large corporations at the expense of the rest of us. The intention, apparently, is to explode the national debt, or in the alternative, cut massive amounts of services that benefit huge numbers of Americans, again, for the tiniest fraction of an increase in a GDP growth. It's possible to create a tax code that is more fair, that incentivizes domestic industry, that provides for critical government functions like defense, entitlements, disaster relief. That's possible, but not with this. This tax cut is a vehicle to redistribute wealth upwards, further enriching the already very wealthy. Thanks for watching. I'm Chris with How to Politics.